Hello, hello. I've got the graveyard shift. Artificial intelligence in education is something that has expanded significantly over the past year. At the end of my talk last year, 2022, I spoke about a few tools that I was starting to use to make my life a little bit easier, because the talk was all about using artificial intelligence to make my life a little bit easier. Because I am, as Bill Gates would describe, efficient, I prefer the word lazy. So I try to make my things as efficient as possible through using tools that are available. Now, after Christmas time, ChatGPT came onto the scenes and things really started to develop and blow up in the space of AI. Now, these are similar conversations that have happened all throughout GESS, and I wanted to talk through some of the different challenges that I faced as an educator and content creator, both sharing AI tools and then also using them inside the classroom. To start off with, you might see different images. These are all kind of AI created. I've put the prompts down in the corner if you want to use tools like that. This is Ideogram, and I'm going to talk about that later on. So, do we see a problem? What do we think is the problem? I'm open to hands up.
Where do you begin? There's lots. So
yeah, where do you begin? There's loads. And I was having a conversation with a lovely gentleman in this audience, and they said, if everything is the focus, nothing is the focus. And I was looking at this, thinking, all right, I've used one or two on here. I've used Crayon with my class. I've used Runway. I've used Copy AI, was on my 2022 talk last year. But the thing about this is that there's no way for any teachers who have very little time anyway to kind of see this and go, what can I do? Yeah, you know, you've got the things on the side, text to code, text to motion, text to text. But again, what does that even mean? What are we going to do with these AI tools? So there needs to be a process that teachers and schools can go through to vet out different tools, to start to think about what they can use effectively inside the classroom. And I use something very similar to what I use with my displays, and it's called the PART model. And PART model stands for purpose, accessibility, referred to, and time. So this PART filter is something that I use with my displays. So you'll see two displays. These are two very imperfect displays that I have inside my classroom. When we look at the P, that P is there for purpose. Now, when we look at purpose, you're looking at, are we showing or are we telling? Are we showcasing the children's work, like you can see here with the lovely growth mindset display? Side note, both of these posters on the side have been created using AI, which the children have found very useful. So it's for the children to kind of see, or am I telling them something? Am I sharing some sort of information through my working wall, like in English? And the same happens with AI. What is the purpose of the tool that we are picking up? Is it that we're showing the children something, like a hook for a lesson, or is it that we're getting the children to retell through their learning? Because if it is that we're getting them to retell their learning, there's some things that we need to be careful about. A, accessibility. This perhaps is the most important one. Is the tool actually accessible? Because I know as a teacher, I don't have a tremendous budget. If I want to use GPT-4, I've got to pay $20 a month. I don't have the funding, I don't have the budget to kind of think about that. Again, yes, there's side hacks and ways that you can access those things. However, we do need to be a little bit cautious about what it is. And at the same time, children aren't always able to access a lot of the different tools. So too, we need to be cautious about what it is that we're presenting to other teachers and children. R is referred to, so how much am I referring to these things? If I put this display out in my corridor, I wouldn't refer to this, and in my opinion, this is the most important display. Same as other tools that I have, for example, Canva. If I'm not putting those out in front of the children regularly, children are going to forget it, and so too are the teachers. So we need to be cautious about what we're sharing there. And T, another really important one, time. Time in two ways. Time to create a display, but time to learn an AI tool. Because each AI tool that I shared on the list initially takes a little bit of time to learn. Yeah, you can look at tutorials that someone might create on YouTube. However, if it takes too long to learn and use, it's not going to be used. So in addition to that, you also need to think about the time that it takes for the children to create whatever output it is. I was shared something called Blockade Labs, which was amazing for creating these immersive 3D worlds. But the problem is, it takes about, on a bad Wi-Fi, it takes about 20 minutes. Can you imagine having a class full of 8-year-olds trying to generate a 3D map. Like, I promise it's going to be good. It's going to be good in the end. Yeah, get down off the walls. It's not going to happen. So you need to look at this filter, and you need to use it effectively to see those tools that are available. There's loads of repositories online. However, I just tend to stay away. And through this, I've created my own toolkit. Any guess as to how many tools are on that toolkit? Hands. This is the primary teacher in me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. I've got a 5 at the back. Auction. It is 5. And in the corner, you'll see used by pupils. These are tools that I might have used in the past. So Canva, in my opinion, promise I'm not trying to sell anything, free for teachers, lots of different AI tools that children can use, and I strongly believe that they are highly considering the ethical side of Canva that we're going to discuss in a second. Ideogram, brilliant tool. Those posters that you saw in my displays are ones that I used with myself, creating those using Ideogram. However, do not share that with the children because it's open source. And through the open source, you're going to see lots of other examples. And this is where the bad and ugly starts to come in. Crayon. When I used it with my class last year, it was strong. And it was strong, but not strong enough, to the point where we could tailor the lessons and I could be there as a safeguard, kind of thinking about those different things that might come up. However, as it seems to get stronger, I might even start to take that one away. You need to be a little bit cautious about what you're using and make sure that when you're sharing these generative AI lessons, you're considering how it's being used. Are there models that you're going to be using? Are there scaffolds for the children to have in place so that the wrong things don't come up? Because as a teacher, you can't always guarantee it. 2 things that we're going to discuss, 2 fun ones. Compose.ai has significantly saved me so much time. I've created a tutorial on YouTube on how to use that. It's about 5 minutes long, saved me half an hour every single week through a button click. Again, promise I'm not selling you anything. However, I want to save you guys time because I think it's important. This was what I was on about in terms of ChatGPT 4. You can access it a little bit through Bing Chat. It's not brilliant. I don't think it's as good as the paid version of GPT-4, but personally I don't know because I don't use the paid version of GPT-4. So the goods. I wonder if this is not going to work, because this should be... Is there any volume for this?
First class passengers strutted inside while the third class was being checked for lights.
This is me modeling.
It almost fell over. It was as big as a whale. I gave one last look at my beloved home country, which would be gone for many days, but was also excited because it was the first time I would board a ship like this before I was filled with a good shock, as I saw the chandeliers floating above my head. I went to the bed and lay there as if it was waiting for me to sleep on. There was even a bed for my servants, Corey, Kara, and Rick, and their own bathrooms. I saw a few cafes along. To my swire, and one seemed to have a Warloff pudding. It's my favorite dessert. I'm sure that this will be the best trip ever.
I hope it, yeah, pause. So, this is an amazing tool, and there's kind of a power pairing that I call Canva. And you're using different tools within Canva. We used DID, we used 11 Labs that we'll talk about, and then we used the remove background tool through Canva too. So everything was kind of inside Canva, and we were able to get children to retell what they'd been creating in writing. There are some concerns though. I found a really interesting one through 11 Labs. I was midway through the lesson, the children were buzzing, it was all exciting, they were like, yeah, going to create these AI tools, and then all of a sudden someone put their hand up and said, yeah, this 11 Labs isn't working. And I tried everything. I tried different formats of it, a different version of 11 Labs, there was a different name. And what I came to find was fascinating, that 11 Labs has, I want to call it an anti-DDoS software within it, so that if too many people from one IP are using the software, it blocks it. So if you've got a class of 20 children trying to use the same website, this is something that you need to be worried about and perhaps considerate of. And you can't really test that when you're on your own until you have it in front of the children. So there needs to be platforms available so that you can actually share that. These things are a concern. So 11 Labs, as amazing as it is, not amazing when you share it with a class. Which is a shame, because what I hoped to do was I was hoping I would be able to get them to type out what they're writing and proofread almost using 11 Labs. The fix for that was for them to record their own voice, and they had their own voice over on this, but again, it kind of loses the grammatical purpose. This was using Crayon to visualize what they're writing. Sometimes children, especially younger children, struggle to think about what it is that they're writing. What does the face look like? Now, this is when the AI was a little bit weaker, so we would say, you know, you can't really see the face there. You need to describe the face. Little did they know, due to hallucinations and problems, the face was never going to turn up. But they were able to see what it is that they were writing. And the reverse can happen. You can show them an AI image and say, okay, I've made this using artificial intelligence. What do you need to do to be able to create that? And the children can go and do that. And again, we polished it off with a little bit of Canva, and we put that AI image into a wanted poster, and we put those around as a lovely classroom display. These are the ideogram displays that I'm on about. So I put a Space Theme poster with the words blast off into reading, and after a few remixes, you have to often remix it a few times to make sure it's not hallucinated. This is what was produced. Finally, large language models are what's come out a lot. And when we look at ChatGPT, that is the thing that's the most prominent in the way of AI. I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't show you compose.ai. So this is an email that I've sent myself about a child being ill, and I've just clicked this button that says, say thanks. And from there, you can see a whole email has popped up. Now, obviously, you're not just going to take that and run with it. You're going to do some tailoring. But in terms of saving me time in the morning when I'm actually being able to, you know, I'm meant to teach my maths lesson or English lesson, that's a brilliant starting point. And it saved me a lot of time. So these tools are out there. Unfortunately, well, we switched to Outlook recently, and that's not available. So I do miss this. But if anyone uses Gmail, compose.ai is something that's going to save you a significant amount of time. So now we move on to the ugly. Bias. In my opinion, bias is something that you do need to be concerned about. Bias refers to the amount of people that are included in a data set. When we look at the data set, a lot of AI is trained on content that has been produced by people who look and have a similar culture to me. White, Western, coming up to middle age. And what happens is through that, some of those views and opinions come through. So this is something that was shared on social media recently, and I thought, this is interesting. So it's, hey, ChatGPT. This is using ChatGPT 4, which again, I don't have access to. I'd like to create a series of promotional images to help promote a new online safety guide for the Middle East from so-and-so to use on social media. Can you help? And this is what was created. I wonder if you can kind of think of any potential bias problems. I'm happy to have hands up. So looking at that image, what bias image, what problems can you see? Anyone? Darren?
Religious bias?
Potentially.
Yeah, of course, cultural and religious bias
Yeah.
is
So the cultural and religious bias through, you can almost see the opinions of the bias coming through. You know, there are women in the Middle East who do not wear hijabs, and those things come through. The bias then extends to my next ugly, and my next problem is the fact that it can create anything. So as a teacher, you need to be cautious. The prompt for this was children gambling. And I find that quite interesting that you've got Russian, Italian, French, Japanese people who are all gambling. And this is a concern because I find it interesting again. You can see the bias. Russian, they're definitely in a casino. Italian, they're definitely in a casino. French casino, Japanese arcade. That stereotyping and bias starts to come through, and you can see it through the images that are produced. The next ugly is scams. You can probably see by the title where we're going with this.
Not really. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it's not. What if I were to tell you that I'm not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality?
The conversation stems from the concern we have around that. Now, I said look at his eyes, and the reason why I said look at his eyes is because you can quite clearly see through looking at the eyes that it's not quite real. The voice doesn't quite match up with what's being showed on the artificial intelligence. But it is improving, it is getting better, so there are some concerns that you need to consider. My biggest concern around this is the voice replication through things like 11 Labs. When we're looking at the voice replication, I think, right, if you remove the image, then all of a sudden you can have a voice. That voice can be anyone's voice. Hands up who's perhaps created a video for online learning. Yeah, so your voice is potentially out there, perhaps a bit more buried than someone like myself, but my biggest fear is that my voice can be replicated very easily, and it's not very hard to find out where I work, so it's not very hard to, in theory, please don't do this, to create my voice and get that voice to say anything to my school. And there's all sorts of implications about that. So what do? We potentially start to think about making sure that people are educated. But often the artificial intelligence is further ahead than the people who are educating. So from there, we move on to the next potential problem, and that is chatbots. This is Snapchat, very popular with young people. Snapchat's released Snap AI, which is based on elements of ChatGPT and other large language models. And while this is slightly comical, there are some concerns about this. Again, there are hallucinations where this is information that's created. There's concerns about the copyright, where these sources are coming from. But I find the conversation that comes from this quite comical. My term paper is due tomorrow, and then he gets them to create something. This is the article that's written, and he says, thank you, I'll turn this into my teacher. And he says, you're welcome. I'm glad I could help. Good luck with your paper, and I hope you get a good grade, despite the fact that he's given him the article. Now, another concern, if you go into this article through the Washington Post, is perhaps some of the more challenging conversations that this AI has through alcohol use. It says, I'm 15, I'm going to be having a party. Can you recommend some of the best adult drinks available? It says, yeah, enjoy the party. Here's some different things that you might be able to consume. However, do be aware that you need to be concerned that you need to be 21 to drink. But it had already given all of those different ideas. And when we're thinking about the next quote, you need to think about yourself as a teacher or leader and your position that you have in terms of the impact with your children. It's quite a fitting quote because we often associate the words artificial intelligence with magic. And it's that magic element that is simply the ability to understand language and reallocate that language. So if we're not careful about the way that we're using it, it could cause injury, but it can also be a tremendous benefit. Now, obviously, there's no replacement for teachers, in my opinion, at the moment, because when artificial intelligence gets it wrong, it gets it really wrong. So that is why, in my opinion, artificial intelligence is going to be significantly important. Now, I'd love to finish it here. However, when you're taking this to your school, you need to think about a few different things. And I'm hoping that I can leave you with a bit of a framework. This is the KIND framework for ethical AI, KIND being a bit of a primary school word. However, we look at what we can do to start to augment artificial intelligence inside the classroom. So K is for knowledge, helping teachers build up knowledge. It's not just teachers, it's all stakeholders, whether it's leaders, whether it's senior leaders, making sure that they have an understanding of what should be happening in terms of artificial intelligence, and then also making sure that all those stakeholders, whether it's owners of the school, SLT, are included in those conversations. As those conversations take place, the next thing you need to do is inform teachers about the artificial intelligence that's being brought in. Now, a year's gone on now, and many schools don't have an artificial intelligence policy. I know myself, that's not something we're looking at. But is it something that we really need to start investing in and looking at integrating? I think so. Making sure that we think about where artificial intelligence places in terms of children's education, thinking about things like bias, copyright, hallucinations that we looked at previously. The next is, once you've introduced these policies and ways that it can be used, is making sure that those conversations don't just die out, because all too often a new EdTech tool might come about and then it's just kind of forgotten about. And the same happens with artificial intelligence. There needs to be clear communication lines so that those conversations can continue, so that teachers, when those tools are coming out, can bring those tools inside the classroom and share what's working and what's not working. And the final one, I could do a whole 20-minute talk just about the one that's on the left, is data protection. All too often you'll see, oh look at what I can do with this artificial intelligence tool. I can put my face into this tool and I can start making myself speak, but you can speak. So why do you need an artificial intelligence tool to do that? And the concern here is that you don't necessarily know where that data is going. I watched a talk about black box, and I quite like the idea that you can't see a lot of these things because they're not called open source. When we look at things like ChatGPT, you can't see the thinking behind the software. So if you're including personal data through children's data, whether it's your own data, whether it's reports, all of that data, you're not really sure how that's being utilized, so you need to consider that. And again, go back to that quote about the potential damage that can be caused by artificial intelligence, and also the way that you have a part in making sure that it's developed effectively. So thank you. Make sure that you're using tools for a purpose, not just because we can. Because AI is just a screwdriver, you can mess up your house with it. Again, made with artificial intelligence. Thank you. Here's some other tools that I use. Spoke about Diffit. However, like I said, you shouldn't just go, yeah, I'm going to use all of these because, you know, Thomas said use your own part filter to think, are these actually appropriate for my classroom setting, for my children? I can, of course, recommend lots of them that are very easy to use, but just make sure you do your homework and research before going, here we go. Thank you very much. Do we have any